Hello and welcome to the syllabus of research methods. So as I mentioned in the introduction video, scheduling appointments, because we'll be doing individualized advising for you guys. So I like to use iCalendly, and what I'm doing with this particular thing is you can email me, but I want it to be electronic. And so this gives you a better idea of what my schedule actually looks like because it goes straight to my Google Calendar. And so if I'm in meetings or I got other Zoom meetings going on or I have other people scheduled, you'll be able to see that, hey, I'm already busy. You can't sign up for that time frame. So it saves a little bit of time in the scheduling process by going through the Calendly. It is an online class, so I don't have anything planned as far as a synchronous Zoom meeting for research methods. However, if you guys feel that we need to have more class meetings because you're not grasping certain material, by all means, let me know. I will have an open discussion forum available for all questions. And to please ask questions because you may not be the only person that has that question. Other classmates might have that similar question. Or maybe because you asked the question, they're like, oh, that was a great question. I never thought of that. All right, so go ahead and ask questions on the open forum. That's what it's going to be there for. Get through all of our learning outcomes. So mainly I want to show you guys that we're going to be applying the skills for developing hypothesis and using appropriate references, critiquing research, but we're using the American Medical Association, the AMA guidelines for this rest of this year. So I'm not going to allow you guys to use APA formatting for your research. I'm going to make you use the AMA formatting. So this very first week, we're going to be discussing and having you guys learn that there is a difference between APA and AMA, and you may actually like the AMA formatting a little bit better when it comes to citations, just because it's all numbers based and no longer where you have to type out author's last name and year it was published. It's all just a number now. And then your reference section is just, it's numbered. Scroll back again. Obviously, we're going to be doing statistical analysis. That's going to be more towards the spring semester. But, at the end of this semester, I want you guys to be able to understand what statistical analysis you need to use for your research. All right. Some common ones that we'll be going through would be like specificity, sensitivity, odds ratios, likelihood ratios, those kind of concepts on a 2x2 table. Describe a range of quantitative and qualitative research designs. So you're going to be learning a little bit of both. When we talk about the quantitative, we're talking about statistics and numbers, quantity. When we talk about quantitative, we're talking about quality. It's more of an observational kind of concept. There's no more numbers really involved with that one. All right, so the required text is going to be the ACSM's Research Methods first edition. I know that with the bookstore now, you don't have to necessarily buy your books through eCampus anymore. And so if you're going to go out to like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or just look for the best price you can find on books, use the ISBN 13 number, all right? That will bring you straight to the exact book you need. All you have to do is you can go to a Google search, type in just the numbers, and it'll pull straight to your book. Recommended texts. If you're thinking about doing a survey, the Dillman book, Internet, Phone, Mail, and Mixed Methods Surveys is a great book to help guide you along as far as developing your questions and the validity of those questions. If you're thinking you want to do something more qualitative, whether it's with a survey, open-ended questions in your survey, or you just want to interview people or observe different lifestyles and how it's being affected by things, the Pitney book on qualitative research will walk you through everything step by step to make sure that your research is validated and that it's going to be technically reliable. So that way, for when we talk about publication, a lot of people scrutinize observational research because there's no numbers with it. And this is there is a way to show the validation of your research. And that's within that book. It tells you how to do it. I don't recommend getting statistics for people who think they hate statistics this semester. I am going to make it a required book next semester for the individual research. And the reason I'm going to do that is because this particular book dives really well into things like the t-test and the ANOVAs and the multifactorial ANOVAs. It also talks about the non-parametric statistics when it comes to like chi-squares. And it not only does it talk about it and teach it extremely well, but it also has step-by-step guides on how to do it in SPSS, and that's our statistical package program that a lot of people use for numbers. And so I will tell you that this is going to be required for your individual research next semester anyway, so you don't have to necessarily have it for this semester. All right, my breakdown. I couldn't remember if we were allowed to have pluses and minuses with grad school. I think we are. I'm not exactly sure where the numbers fall, so I just did a basic one for you right now. Keep in mind there are no D's in grad school. You go straight to an F. So anything below a 70 is going to be an F. All right. If you're in that range of getting that C plus, B plus, whatever, I will give it to you. I just have to find out what it actually is that the school is recommending for those particular policies. When it comes to your assignments, it is a lot of assignments because this is a self-learning model. All right. I'm going to make you guys try and learn the material on your own. All right. Whether you read the chapters, watch videos. Sometimes you might have to come up and look for extra videos to help with clarification. Asking me questions to help clarify things. That's all within reason. But you're going to have 2 discussions. Now, these aren't going to be the normal discussions you're used to doing. Instead, these discussions are a little different. You're going to have 6 assignments. But each one of these assignments is going to be a step in the direction of your research. So one assignment will be developing a research question through PICOs. Another assignment is going to be developing your purpose statement and your hypotheses. All these things are going into your introduction. You're going to have things on dealing with population and sampling for methodology. You're going to have things working on your data collection, data analysis, what you're going to be using for. Those are in your methodologies. You're also going to be doing an IRB certificate at the end of the semester. That's one of the assignments as well. Because when you submit for your proposals to the IRB committee, you have to have that certificate. So everything I'm doing for assignments is a step to help you with your introduction and methods and the final proposal. You're going to be doing research appraisal, all right? And what we mean by that is you're going to be looking at other people's research and you're going to be trying to kind of like put a grade to it. So like on a Pedro scale, it's out of 11 possible points. Well, you look through it and you say, yes, they did it, or no, they didn't. If it's a yes, then here's the page and the paragraph it's on. If it's a no, it's a no. And you go through and you grade it. Because a lot of times when you read systematic reviews, and a systematic review is done on randomized clinical control trials that use Pedros for grading, they will say that their inclusion criteria was a Pedro score of 4 or better. So now you know exactly, well, it's a 4 out of 11, so is that really a really good article? Probably not. The higher the Pedro score, the better the article. You're going to have a midterm. Midterm will be mostly on the first part of the semester. It's going to be on the theories and how we develop things for your introduction. Midterm, your final exam will deal more with some statistics on what we're actually doing, what we're using, why we use it, what kind of studies we use certain things for. I'm going to have you guys learn a 2x2 table, so that way you should be able to simply do sensitivity, specificity, odds ratio, and positive negative likelihood ratios. It's real simple to do on a 2x2 table. So that'll be part of your final exam. You have a research project, obviously, so you have your introduction is going to be due, your methodology is going to be due, and then the final research proposal will be 30%. Now let's get into what each one of these is going to be. So your discussions, I said it's a little different, okay? So your discussions are nothing more than the rough drafts of your papers. So your introduction paper, discussion number 1, I want the rough draft of your introduction paper, all right? And here's why I want to do it this way. Because you're going to submit your rough draft, and I'm going to have somebody else in your class assigned to edit. Be your peer reviewer, as it were, and edit your rough draft and make suggestions for you to correct. All right. I also will have a couple suggestions on there, but that way it gives you guys a better idea of, one, how to review other people's research, but also at the same time, you're going to get different feedback from different people. And so it'll only make your final paper stronger. So I'm doing that for both the introduction and the methodology. So this is not going to be allowed to have a late work policy on this one. The rough draft is due on a Sunday. The editing remarks are due by like Wednesday at midnight. Give your classmates the time. If you're going to sit there and turn in your rough draft on a Tuesday and expect a one-day turnaround, it's never going to happen. So you won't get points if your work is late when it comes to the rough draft. And if you're the editing student, be mindful of your classmates' time. All right? Don't wait until Wednesday night to do the editing, because now you're only giving them 4 days to make corrections. If it's there on a Sunday and you can get to it on Monday, get to it on Monday. But I'm giving you until Wednesday at midnight, because your schedules are going to be in flux a little bit, because we don't know exactly when you're working at your site. I don't know what we're doing as far as any games, or if it's scrimmages, or if when practices are going to end, and all that kind of thing. Your research appraisal. So I was talking about how I'm going to make you grade other people's research with research appraisals and Pedros and what's known as the spectrums. So you're going to have to do 4 peer-reviewed articles. All right, so when you're looking at your articles for your research, hopefully you have more than just 4 articles to go through at one point in time. But what I really want is one of the articles has to be a randomized control trial. That way you can do at least one Pedro. One of the articles must be a systematic review. This way you can do a spectral scale on it. All right? There are 2 different types of grading on them, but it works great in both ways. And then you have 2 articles of your choice. If you have case studies or an animal clinical trial, something like that, then that's fine. We'll just make sure that you're using the correct grading system for it. Again, everything we're going to be doing is going to be in AMA format. And what I mean by I want a CAP, it's a critically analyzed paper. It's all I'm really looking for is your grading system. And then almost like an abstract, if you were, or an overview of the article itself. I don't need a grand paper totally written. If all of your articles are on the exact same topic and you wanted to make a paper out of it, that's fine. But all I'm really looking for is a summary, about a 1-page summary per article. The research appraisal. So it gives you an idea what I'm looking for. Were you good at interpreting what they found as far as results? Were you able to explain any of the evidence that they gave you? Obviously sources of evidence, this shouldn't be a no-brainer, unless you're doing observational kind of this person's use of a modality only worked on this particular person once kind of thing. Obviously your introduction paper. So what I'm looking for in your introduction is an opening statement, and that's usually like something that grabs the reader's attention. In the very beginning of your research, it's a very broad statement. It's not anything very specific to your research. So let's say on my dissertation right now, I'm looking at ankle sprains, but more specifically, chronic ankle instability. Well, something that can really grab someone's attention is using statistics with it, all right? So if I told you that 65% of the population are going to sprain an ankle at some point in their life, you're thinking, oh, well, that's a pretty large number, Now, what if I told you that 70% of that original 65 is going to re-sprain their ankle more than once because they've already had an initial injury? And that, of that 70% of the population that had an ankle sprain once, they're going to end up, there's a high correlation of about 62% of those population will end up with chronic ankle instability and with the sensations of giving way. All right, so now I use statistics. And so I have to back my statistics up with research, because obviously I can't just make it up out of the air, right? So I'm going to provide you with the articles for reference that I got the information from, and it could be more than one. So my opening statement might have on an AMA system be like an opening statement, and then it might be superscript number 1 through number 8. All right. And so then when you go to my reference section, you'll see the numbers 1 through 8 correlate with that exact statement I made on that first sentence. All right. And that's how we do the AMA. It's no longer trying to write out all the authors' names and dates. It's now numbers and very concise, very and organized. I need a literature review. What we mean by literature review is you should have been diving into the literature so heavy that you're now considered an expert within your own realm, okay? And when we start off very broad, and then we funnel down in becoming more narrow as we discuss things. So in my case, I'm talking about ankle injuries and chronic ankle instability and the sensation of giving way at the very beginning, right? Very broad. And then now I start attributing things. Well, that sensation of giving way is due to a muscle weakness or a decreased reaction time from a reflex, right? And then I start talking about why that occurs and how that reflex affects things now, right? So then we talk about the Hoffman reflex now affects more than just the ankle. It actually affects the nervous system in the spine itself at whatever level of dermatome, myotome I'm talking about. All right. And because it affects at the spinal level, it also affects everything below that level. So let's think about where we're at in our lateral ankle when we talk about myotomes. All right. Well, they're usually going to be about L3, L4 region. So everything below the L3, L4 region is also going to be affected when you talk about motor control from the brain. And so what happens below L3, L4 is now you got to deal with your glutes, and specifically gluteus minimus and gluteus medius, right? And so now those are being affected by this reflex phenomenon. You now end up with a weakened gluteal aspect, which now affects their balance. And so we're seeing gait control issues, and we're seeing postural instabilities from ankle sprains. And that's the reason why is that Hoffman reflex. And so I kept getting more and more narrow and focused. And so then I have a purpose statement. And so my purpose statement now is utilizing manual therapy, all right? And then I can get more specific and say that I'm going to be using the Graston technique or whatever. Can we reverse postural instability by decreasing the amount of adhesions and scar tissue built upon this region of the lower extremity, right? And so my hypothesis then would be, I believe it can, is pretty much what I'm saying. And so that's how you would do your introduction. You funnel it down. And we'll get into that a little bit more in depth as we go. What I want you guys to see is your rubric for this, because as you can tell, you only have 5 things I'm grading you on. At 10%, each one's really worth 20% of the grade. So we have to be mindful of that situation, that I'm not expecting you guys to get the greatest, grade you're ever going to have in your life on your introduction. All right. I'm expecting some problems with the introduction. I'm expecting you to be in the 1.5 to 1.25 range. And a lot of you will be in that range for quite a few things. There might be 1 or 2 of you that have a 2 or 1.75 for a couple of these topics. But for the most part, this is where I'm expecting most people to be through. And what that does, when you think about and you start adding it up, well, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 1.5, 3, 6, 7.5. So if you scored all 1.5s, you just got a 75% on your paper. So you start throwing in some 1.25s, your numbers go down a bit, okay? So be mindful of that. The methodology paper. When we get to the methodology, I want to know things about your population and how you're going to do your sampling to get your population. What is your treatment or testing protocols? Are you using a survey? Are you doing observations? Are you actually going to try and get through something that's hands-on? If it's going to be a systematic review, that I have to know that your population is pretty much going to be articles. Your sampling is going to end up being the databases you're finding everything at. Your treatment and testing protocols, this all comes down to what ends up being your inclusion and exclusion criteria for those systematic reviews. Data collection is a big one that people struggle with. They don't understand when we get to data collection, it's why what are you actually trying to collect? All right. What are you trying to figure out? What are your variables? What is your kind of concepts? All right. And then data analysis. If you're doing something with numbers, even a survey has a Likert scale and has numbers to it. What are you going to use? Are you going to use SPSS? Are you going to use Excel? What statistical analysis are you going to do? Are you going to do a chi-square, an ANOVA, a t-test? Are you going to do independent or dependent t-tests? Maybe you're going to do a multifunctional ANOVA, multifactorial ANOVA. There's so many different ways to do things, but you have to tell us what you're going to use. Again, you should have some articles that reference what you're doing. Now, I say the methodology paper should have at least 3 articles for things, and it's debatable, really, depending on what you're doing for research. If you're going to do something like a survey, you need to support what survey you're doing with other people's research and why that survey is validated. All right, so that would be your testing equipment, right? You're validating your survey by validating the testing equipment. No different than, say, I'm using surface EMG and a Y balance test for mine. I have to show the validation for why I'm using those things, so I have to have articles for that. The systematic review is the tricky one. You don't really have to have the articles necessary for this, but what we want is a statement stating how you got to your articles. All right. So you went to PubMed, you typed in your keywords, any Boolean terms, and you had however many articles showed up. And it could be you had 100,000 articles developed that showed up, right? And so then you applied your inclusion criteria, and that dropped you down to 50 articles, we'll say. So now you have to go through and you have to read all 50 of those articles and apply your exclusion criteria to it. And by including your exclusion criteria, you may narrow it down to 20 articles total. But I have to know that that's what you did. And what makes it even harder is I have to be able to do your exact protocol and come up with a very similar number to what you came up with. And so that's one way you're going to end up doing it. I don't have to know what articles you necessarily found just yet. That'll come when we start talking about the results section. But I have to see that process that you did to get to those articles. When we talk about the data collection for a systematic review, what data are you pulling out to help answer your overall research question? All right. And then how are you going to analyze that data? You still have to do it even for a systematic review. All right, and then we get to our final research proposal. Now, I want to show you guys what this really combines. I want you to see that your introductory section is still in there. Your methodology section is still in there. So the most amount of writing that you're going to be doing is already done. You may have to do some small editing tweaks after my feedback from your grading, but otherwise that's done, right? So now what do you have to do for your proposal? Cover page, abstract. In the abstract, introduction and methods only. I don't need to know results. I don't need to know discussion or any of those things like that, right? We're gonna have you do a power analysis. Numbers of participants needed to achieve 80% power rating. If you're doing a systematic review, you won't be doing a power analysis. You'll be doing what's known as a risk of bias analysis instead. The articles you found, what is the risk that those authors had some bias when they were doing things, right? If you're doing a survey, how many people need to respond to your survey in order to equate to that 80% power? All right, so we're still going to make you guys do this no matter what kind of research you're doing. There is going to be that power rating. Estimated cost of research. How much is it going to cost you to do your research? All right. Systematic reviews. Sometimes there's articles you have to pay for. And I know that a lot of those articles are about $40 a piece. So if you have to purchase an article, it's part of your estimated cost. All right. If you're doing a survey, I know for a fact that if you use SurveyMonkey Anything over 10 questions, they will charge you for it. You'll have to sign up for a package deal. All right. So just know that that's a potential cost of your research. If you're going to do qualitative and you're going to have to interview people or you're going to observe somebody, you know, do you have to actually travel somewhere, and that's the cost of gas? All right. These are all costs you have to think about when you're doing your estimated cost of research. Timetable. When are you going to submit for your IRB approval? When are you wanting to start data collection? When are you going to end your data collection and do your results? How long it will take you to write up your results section? How long will it take you to review your results and start writing up your discussion section? All right. And you just have to think about how long are you going to give yourself for these time frames, knowing that you have to have everything turned in no later than the third week in April. All right. So there comes a time crunch here when we start getting into December on whether or not you'll be able to finish your research if you're, you know, either dawdling on things, if you're procrastinating on things, or maybe your research is too grand in scope. Human Research Certificate. Again, that was your assignment number 6. Your IRB certificate will come from that. All right, it's already going to be done for you. Consent to treat letter is something you will have to do for everything except for a systematic review. If you're doing a survey and you're going to borrow a survey that's already been done prior, and you have to get permission from whoever wrote that survey to use it. A lot of surveys are open to the public and don't require permission, but it is beneficial to try and get permission because your IRB committee is going to ask you if you had permission. All right? That's where we come down to those copyright laws. At the same time, if you're doing something with live people, whether it's interviewing, even if you're doing a Zoom interview, you have to have a consent form. If they're doing a survey, not only do you have to have consent and permission to use that survey, but everyone that's taking that survey has to have a write-up of what you're doing with a statement at the bottom saying, by continuing on to take this survey, you're providing consent to use the data. All right. So even surveys have to have multiple consents. Obviously, if you're going to do something with a modality, you have to have consent from the patients and treatment-wise. But all those go into that proposal paper. If your proposal paper is set and finished and looks really good, I'm going to tell you, go ahead and start writing up your IRB proposal. I have to sign off on it, not a big deal. You save it in as a PDF file, send it to me. I put it on an electronic signature, and I submit it into the IRB, submit it to the IRB committee to get the final approval. It takes about 2 weeks to get the responses back from the IRB committee on getting your approval. All right, so just keep that in mind when you do your timetables. It's easier to get a better grade on your research final project because I have 10 sections. All right, and so let's say you're getting 2.5 on every single one of them. You ended up with a 25 out of 30. And so you really only lost like 15%. So that would be like an 85 now instead of it being a 75. So you get a better score here. And typically what I was seeing from the previous group is mostly everybody was right around that 2.5 mark by the time we got to this paper. There were a few that got to that 275 areas as well. And so you're going to be seeing a better grade at the end than you do in the first couple ones. That's also why I made it 30% and not just 10. So I want to give you guys some help getting a better grade in the class as well. Late work policy, obviously my discussions can't be, right? Because you're time constrained on what you're doing. The research proposal paper, I need it to be submitted when it has to be submitted. You're more than welcome to submit it early, but I need time to obviously read it and grade it in order to get your final grades in. The midterm exam, it's got a set date that everything's due. The final exam has a set date everything's due. However, when I do your midterm and your final exam, I will have them open for 3 days. So you have a 3-day window to complete them in. Obviously, it's what works best in your schedule. So as you can see, we're going to be extremely busy this semester when it comes to research methods. You have the first week off and you have the third week off. After that, every single week, something is going to be due. Assignment 1 is your PICO question and your research. PICO's in your research question. Then I'm going to have an assignment based on qualitative. You know, how do we validate, how do we make things reliable through qualitative research? Then you have your literature appraisal. Assignment 3, coming up with your purpose statement and your hypotheses. All right. Then we have our midterm. Now, once we have this, hopefully you guys are already working on your introduction, right? Because then you have now your discussion number 1 is your rough draft of your introduction. Then you have your actual introduction itself is due. Assignment 4 is talking about population and sample size, inclusion, exclusion criteria. Assignment 5 is some statistics, like I talked about, how I'm going to make you guys do 2x2 tables. Then you have the methodology rough draft, and then your methodology paper. Notice the time frame on these. There's only so much time because it's right there, you know, making final edits, not having to change everything around. Assignment 6, as I said, was going to be your IRB certificate. And then you see that you have your research project proposal is due. All right. So what I did with the exams, your midterm exam will be due on a Sunday. Your final exam is due on a Wednesday. And that's just because of the exam schedules. All right. Obviously, even though you're online, everything falls within the institutional policies and academic honesties still take place. There is no real attendance policy for this class. It's an online class. I'm not going to hold you to that you have to read your books and you have to watch the videos. Just know that it's going to come through in your writing and on your midterm and final exams if you do or don't. And then the last thing I want you to take note of, all right, because it's an online class, there really is no severe weather policy for us. And to say that a power failure is why you couldn't get something turned in time, that's not an excuse. That's a procrastination, all right? If you are going to wait until Sunday at 10 p.m. to try and submit something, and there's a massive storm that comes through and knocks out your power, my first question to you is, why did you wait until then? All right? So you have all week to work on things. Why would you wait until Sunday? I understand Sunday's your free day most times, but why would you wait to try and do all of it in one day? Things should have been done already. All right. From the introduction video to here, you guys should have an expectation of what I'm getting from for research methods.